Okay, everybody, this is going to be part 6 of this video on developing an internal assessment / big computer science project with documentation. And today I want to try to look at testing plan and error checking our program before we get too far into it. All right, so let's take a look at what we're looking at here. So let's start with our actual section A, and we're now still trying to meet the minimum requirements. And let's also take a look at section B, because now we're going to write something into our testing plan. Okay, so scrolling down to the testing plan, we had made a point that during the UI development, stub codes placed in the controller classes. We did that last time. Today what I want to do is test the UI for actually maybe I'll do some dictation here so I don't have to write this. That would be good. And how do I do that? Dictate, here we go. Test the UI for the OK and cancel button to make sure that the fields are not left empty. And if they are left empty, prompt the user to fill them in before initiating any further logic. New paragraph. Test the main UI for similar types of potential user interface errors from the user's experience, bracket, UI, close bracket, etc. Period. Okay, so let's see. Test the UI for the OK and cancel button. Make sure the fields are not left empty. If they're left empty, prompt the user to fill them in before initiating any further logic. Test the main UI, user's experience. And this was supposed to be like this. Okay, so we've got a bit of a testing plan now happening. So this is kind of an order, so I'm going to put them into a numbered list to kind of sort of lay out the sort of look I want for what my testing plan kind of is at this point. Okay, it's still not great, but it's something at this point. I actually have a testing plan. I have a kind of a testing plan in place, which I think is better than nothing. And whoops, keep a bit of an issue with that. Let me just try that again. Okay, live editing, always fun. Okay, so that's that, and I'm going to also scroll up to my section up here, enter today's date, which is March 29th of 2022. Okay, same idea that I had with here, and I'm going to say that error checking and documented testing plan on the user interfaces. Okay, so will this address any of my section A success criteria, right? Let's take a quick look. So it kind of addresses 1D, the user interface, multiple forms, solid user experience. That's really the only one from a testing standpoint it addresses. So I guess I'll put in 1D into my section B here, that this will address section 1D. Okay. All right. So let's actually now get some coding going here. So we're going to open up some of our, now that everything is shifted to our controller classes, the main controller and the new note controller, right? So this is now where all the logic resides, right? So when the new note controller is brought up, and maybe I'll also use this as an opportunity to put in a little documentation. This is my constructor. It sets the class properties, right? That's kind of a good thing to get documented at this point, since that's what's going on. What is the new note UI? Well, that's the user interface, or in this case, the user interface for making a new electronic note. Whoops. This is the text box field. So I'm using kind of both of those words together, text box and field together, right? They're kind of both happening. If a word doesn't appear, I can add it to my dictionary so that it stops bugging me. The text box field, okay, for the title of the note. Okay, and that's really going to be what the date and the other one are as well, right? Okay, so this is for the date of the note, and this is for the text of the note, really the content of the note. Okay, so then we created parameters, okay, and I'm going to add that in there. It connects the past parameters to the class properties, otherwise known as global variables of this class. And they're encapsulated. So I'm going to add that in there, encapsulated. They're private in this class. Okay, so that's what the this dot did. Okay, and then it also sets the startup conditions for this user interface. So that's what it's doing down here. It's setting the location and stuff like that. I'm going to add one other thing to this that I hadn't done before. New note UI dot set resizable to be false. I'm not going to allow them to resize that user interface. Just to demonstrate what I mean by this, when a new node is created, that button is no longer an option. They can't use it in that way. Okay. All right. So that's what I have. Now, when they use the user interface, they will click a couple buttons. They can click OK, they can click cancel, and they can close the frame. In all of those situations, I think, I might want to do a little bit of error checking, okay? With cancel and closing, the only error checking I would really need to do is, are they sure they want to do this, right? Like if they're canceling it, that means they can just disregard everything that's on there. And instead, I just want to confirm that that's what they want to do. So here I can use one of the classes that we brought in, if you look past the other videos, and it's in my... it's in our I/O package called dialogs. So in the dialogs class, there's a whole bunch of methods and things in there that you can use, including a little yes/no, a little dialog box that produces a little yes/no. Do you want to, do this certain thing that you're trying to do? So this might be a useful thing to use, is this dialog class. But I might want to use this dialog class in multiple different different places around my program. So here is where, if we go back to our here we go. If we go back to our diagram, right? Our UML diagram. We had this idea that we'd be making a data structures class, a class that would produce data structures, and that we could reference it when we needed to from multiple places. So this would be a good idea again. If I look through my different classes, we have the data structures class. Now is time to maybe use it. That here in the data structures class, we would have a public static, so it's shared across. We don't need multiple instances of data structures across all the classes. A dialogs class where I could call upon this stuff. Now, obviously, to use this dialogs class, I'm going to have to import it from my I/O package, okay? And I will have to instantiate it. So I'm going to create a public static method to initialize this data structure. So dialogs equals a new dialogs class. And as you can see, I've got a variety of different data constructors I can use here. So maybe I'll just use the one with the title and make a title variable here. So this would be another place where I can make a title variable that could cross all my different classes. So public static final string title equals electronic notes. Okay, so that title will now get applied to this dialog. Oops, this is a void method. Now, when would I call this method? I think I would call that right at the start of this program. Right at the very start of this program, I would initialize stuff. So we can go all the way back to where our main is, right? And our main right now is located, where is our main? Right here, electronic notes. Okay, so the first thing we had done was start up the main UI, which is still good, but now what I'm going to do is go to data structures. Did I spell that right? Yes. And I better import that. Dot. And I'm going to initialize things. So things are initialized at the start, which calls this method, which sets up the dialogues, which sets up the title. So now, when I'm over in this new note controller, I can use data structures. I'm having a lot of trouble typing today. Okay, and I can import that. Dot. I can go to dialogues. Dot. I can call upon the yes/no method. I can ask a little question. Are you sure you want to cancel this new note? Question mark. So I'm basically asking that question. Are you sure this is what you want to do? That you want to cancel the new note that you're attempting to make here by canceling it? And that's going to return a value to me, a response from the user, int response equals this. So that is coming in. Let me just double check that yes, no. Oh, it returns a Boolean. I'd already set that up. So that's going to be a yes or no. So if, I can even put it right into an if statement. If this thing is yes, if this thing evaluates to true, okay, then I can do what I need to do, which is to leave this frame, right, to be done with it. So this dot, right, it's the same thing I had over here, new note dot dispose. Whoops. So I'm just going to take that line and put it up here. Okay, so I dispose of the note. If the answer is no, then things just disappear and go back to normal. In theory, let's test that now. This is our testing plan. So when I hit cancel, are you sure you want to cancel this new note? If I say no, it goes back to normal. If I say yes, then we got another issue. And it's trying to dispose of it. Okay, so that's the cancel idea. I'm just going to put this in two places, in here and in closing. But I think that might be redundant code. So, oh man, I'm having some issues with my copy paste today. Could be because I am using two mice here instead of one. And instead of cancel right here, I'm just going to call closing. I think that'll be even easier. So we'll just jump over to the same method. And let's see where we're at now. Let me just close this down and rerun this and see what we're at. So I create a new note. I go to cancel. Are you sure? And it goes away. I also try and do it this way. Are you want to cancel? If I say no, we're back to here. If I say yes, then it disappears. So that's the testing plan I wanted. That's the plan to make sure that that type of error would not occur when the user is using this particular thing. Okay, let's document this. Okay, when the user tries to close this UI, confirm this before closing with a dialog with a yes/no dialog. So that was really easy because of that imported code. Now, in a lot of ways, that's the same as the cancel button here, but let's just document that as well. User clicks cancel, keeping that one simple, which then launches closing. Okay, now OK is obviously a different type of error checking, but that at least addresses that error checking. By the way, let's describe this new note thing that we've been writing here. Whoops. So what have we been writing right now? What is this class for? This class is connected to the UI for adding a new note and runs all the logic associated with that class. So this is this controller connects to the view the user has of the user interface. Something like that. Something like that to give it some documentation. Okay? So, required. I'm not sure why namespace is coming up as an error, but let's just add it to our dictionary. Okay, so the new note UI. There's the fields or the global variables of this class. Here's the constructor method. There's the cancel method. There's the closing method. And it's met our testing plan at this point. Okay? Now, while we're here, would we need to have a similar testing plan for the main UI? Okay? What kind of potential errors could they have? Well, let's maybe move that part of the testing a little bit later. Let's focus on what happens when they click OK. Okay? So what happens when the user clicks OK should we deal with? Let's document it first. The user clicks OK, or the OK button. So that's what happened. The user went and clicked that OK button. We want to error check to make sure the user has filled out. Why can't I spell user today? All three fields. That's going to be a requirement. They can't leave one blank. They cannot be left blank. Okay? Cannot. So if they fill out all three fields and they don't leave them blank, then what? Okay? If they do leave any of the fields blank, what should we do? Well, we should prompt them. That's actually in our testing plan. Then prompt the user, and by prompt them, I'll say with a dialog. Perfect, because we have a dialog ready. With a dialog to fill out that field first. If all fields are filled, then create a note object. We already have a note class ready to go. Well, it's not ready to go, but we have the idea of a note class. We'll create a note object instance and add the note to the collection of notes, which again we have kind of planned. But we're dealing with error checking today, so let's look at that, right? So we're going to check to see if one of those fields is left empty. We have access to the fields, right? We have access to the title text box. So if we get the text from that and it equals a null, it's left empty. Or could also be that the title text box, when we get the text, it dot equals nothing. Those are two potential errors, right? It scroll down a little bit. It's one of those two scenarios, right? then we should prompt them, right? We should prompt them, and I'm going to use a similar way of prompting that I did down here. I'm going to go to data structures, dialogs, and I just want to produce some type of output here, some type of dialogue that does a nice output, right? Like this, an output. So I can specify the text that's going to go in there, right? So please fill out the title. Just something like that. So let's see if that actually works. If I press the OK button, intentionally leaving this title field empty. Please fill out the title. So it did. It did what I wanted it to do. Okay, so that is passing my error check. Oh, I should make sure that if I don't leave it empty, that doesn't appear, right? So if I put something in there, see, it's doing what I expected it to do. Okay, so I can use the exact same logic for the other text fields. There's two more to deal with, right? So there's the date. So let me just do a little replacement in here. Date, and I'll just say date. And then the other one is obviously the big one, the note itself. Note text box. Note, please fill out the text for your note. And a little space here. So there we go. So that's if, okay? And it would have to pass all of those things to get to the next area. So you know what I'll do? I think this will be an easier way. If I hit any of these scenarios where it has to do that, I'm going to return from this method. So I'm going to exit the method so that I'm going to exit the method early so that it doesn't need to go any further in the logic here. So in each of these scenarios, if it hits one of these potential error scenarios, it leaves the method early. Here, if it passed all tests, then I would go on. And I don't need to work on that logic just yet, but I can error check this. So right in my testing plan, I can just double check. I've already tested this, but now if I click OK, please fill out the date. Please fill out the note for your text. So this time I'll fill this one out and backtrack. So let's just see if they were in a different order. See, it's doing the error checking that I want it to do. I can still cancel, right? That's still an option. So all of that's very much error prone or error fixed now. Now, I guess one other thing I could do is I could jump right to the, that would be a neat thing to try, is to actually put the, what's called the focus on that particular thing. So in terms of my title text box, I could request focus. I'll just show you what that does, right? I think this should work. To double check, but like, let's say I'm filling out here and here. Right now, the focus is on the note area. See the little flashing cursor? But if I click OK and it says fill out the title, it didn't work, unfortunately. Oh, there it jumped right to the title as requesting that focus. Took a second. Okay, so I'm going to add that line to my other ones as well. I just think that's a slightly better user experience to deal with that. And I can even add that in a little bit, that I added that feature. It wasn't really part of my testing plan, but I could add it in that kind of came out in the testing. Sometimes that happens, right? In your testing, you actually start to realize this is a feature you've missed as well. Okay, so let's document that in my section B. So in the testing plan, right, and in my sort of design over. You know what? I think I'll leave that out. I'm worried about my word count here. I'm already at 296 words, so I'm a little worried that would kind of, it's a little superfluous, so I'm just going to leave it out. All right, so I think we've met our testing plan there. We've met the testing plan of the new note controller, and we've kind of set up the dialogues here. One of the things I think I noticed in that was the colors were a little off. I just noticed the title that it was misspelled. But so, for example, when I click OK here and electronic notes appears, this is in a white sort of text area. And I kind of don't want that. I kind of want the color to match what's right here. So I'm gonna do a little cheat here. I'm going to take a snip of this. Come on. All right, new snip. Okay, so I got the color, and I'm just going to place this into Photoshop, and I'm going to pull out what that color is, and I'm going to set that color for all my dialog boxes so that that dialog box has the exact color that I want. So let's make a new. I just need something to get the exact color numbers for that particular color. So create, paste, and I'll just do a color sample on that. Okay, 242, 242, 242. That's what the red, green, and blue numbers appear to be. 242, 242, 242. So could I apply that to my logic when I construct this dialog? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, there are other constructors other than this one. There is one that actually allows you to use a background and a foreground and a font. So I think I'll use this one, that I take a particular font and I'll make a font object, which will have that. I'll have a particular background color and a particular foreground color that I will use when I construct this dialog. But obviously I now need these things. I need a font. So let's go up here and make a public static final font equals a new font. Actually, you know what? I think I'll put these into my initialize. So in initialize, so maybe I won't make them final. No, I think I will do it that way. Equals a new font. And in order for this to work, I got to import that font object. And now I can use the font constructor. And if you're not sure about how to use these graphic things, then don't. Or you can look in some of my things that I use. So what font will I be using? I don't know. Arial. What size would I be using? And I could just use the defaults here, but I'll just say font.plain and size, I don't know, 10. For the background, that's not going to be a font. That thing's going to be a public static final color object. Okay, so now I'm going to need to import that, and it'll be my background color. Equals a new color, and we just had those numbers, but let me just jump back to Photoshop. And what were those numbers again? I think it was 242, but I just want to confirm. 242, yeah. 242, 242, 242. 242. All right, let's try that again. 242. 242, 242. Okay, so that'll be my background color. My foreground color will just be white. Or I mean black, pardon me. So the foreground color, the color of the text, will be just white, black. So 0, 0, 0. That's why my numlock's not on. Okay, so that would be the idea there. Now, this constructor I'm trying to use here under dialogues, apparently I used incorrectly. I need to also include a parent component for this to work. So I don't actually want to set up a parent component because it's going to be used maybe with multiple frames. So I'm just going to add a null in there just to satisfy the conditions that it's looking for. And let's see if that works. Let's see if we can actually get now the background colors that I was looking for. Okay, so I got the font. The color seems to be off a little. It doesn't seem to be matching exactly. So I'm going to just re-snip that and try that one more time, because that did not actually seem like the right color. Okay, and let's put that over in Photoshop. And let's do a sample of that. Yeah, it says 242. Okay, well, it's going to be as close as it's going to be. Okay, so that font looks a little off, but it still looks pretty good. And if I go to cancel, it's also picking up that right there. Are you sure you want to cancel this? So that looks pretty good. I think I'll make this slightly bigger at size 12. But other than that, I feel like this is now setting up potentially all the dialogues I would need for this particular program. That'll look great. Okay. All right, just one sec. Okay. All right. So I think if we look at our testing plan now, we've kind of met the first part of this. We've tested the UI for the OK and cancel button to make sure that the fields are not left empty. And if they are left empty, prompt the user to fill them in before initializing any further logic. Done. All right, so we should now maybe just change our testing plan over to the main user interface now at this point. What would happen on that main user interface potentially as errors? So I'm going to open up the UI itself so I can look at it from the perspective of a user. What might they do? Well, one of the things they would do in a lot of these scenarios, if they're displaying all the notes, they're displaying a selected note, right there, display a selected note would imply that they actually have selected a note. So they have to have one selected for that to occur. Same with delete. Searching, sorting, and displaying would imply that it has to check to see that there is notes to display. If this is the first time they're running a program, I could say there are no notes yet saved to display, right? Like there's nothing to display at that point. Okay, so those are our potential errors. So let's go to the main controller UI. Maybe we should take a little time to document this, okay? So I can sort of steal some of the documentation I had from this one and apply it to this one, right? So it's not for adding a new node. This would be for all main program features. But the rest of it is kind of the same. And it runs all the logic associated with the class. This controller connects to the view the user has of the user interface. That's still true, okay? These are still the global variables of that class. So in a lot of ways, just like I did here, this constructor would be very similar. So I'm going to steal some of that constructor code and pop it over here, but that's not quite what I want. Let me steal it properly. All right. So constructor sets the class. So I'm going to steal this part of what I wrote and put it here. See if it works. Connects the pass parameters to the encapsulated class properties, sets up the startup conditions for this UI. That's true, right? That's still true. Main UI. Okay, so it's similar to this. It's a UI for, but I'll just, it's a UI for the main features of the program. Or instead of program, I'll use the word application. Okay, notes list box. Well, what is that? So you can see here, now I can get rid of this stuff. I'll still say it's a field. It is. It's the list box field displaying all the notes. Or to display. I think that's fine the way I said displaying all the notes. That's fine. Okay, I'll just add that to my dictionary list box. This is still true, that it's still doing all this stuff. And you know what? I'm going to also strip away the resizable feature. I thought that was a good idea with the new Note UI. I'm going to do it with this one as well. So but now it's the main UI that I'm stripping the resizable away from. Okay, let's see if this worked. Now I no longer have that option there. Okay. All right, so let's get to some of our error checking. Nothing with new note. New note, it does its own error checking. It still displays a new note. Displaying all notes, this would be if it is in fact empty or not. So in order for this to work, we're going to have to incorporate the logic of where all our notes are stored. And for that, let's jump ahead a little bit. And that's going to be, if we look in our it's going to be in a notes class. The notes class will have the linked list in it. So, and the notes class has to be connected to data structures. So maybe this would be a good opportunity to connect not just dialogues, but our notes class to this. Okay. All right. Sorry, I got a little public static notes. Okay, so our notes object now would be instantiated. So the notes object, not that one, that's the graphic. It's in our data structure class. There's a notes object. We don't need to import it because notes is part of that. So this would also in theory be initialized, right? So notes equals new notes. And that would be the constructor, theoretically, of the notes class. We don't have such a constructor yet. But let's just sort of stub it in here. Public notes constructor. So that would be constructed when the data structure is built. It would build up the notes. So now I can access it from here. So now I can say if data structures. So that's going to need to be imported, right? I got to import. Why did I not spell that properly? Oh, I should just not touch that mouse, as it is just not working. Data structures. So now we better import that. Why? Let's just go to this guy, new note UI, because it was imported here. And let's go to our main controller. Oh, it's already imported. That's why. It's already been imported. Oh, sorry. No, I'm clicking on the wrong thing. Yes, it already has been imported. Okay, so then in data structures dot, I'd be going into notes dot, and I would checking to see if it is empty or not. So that would be a nice method to have in that class to check to see if it's empty. So I'm going to create that method in the notes class. So it should build it, okay? And I'll just get rid of that. And for now, I'm just going to return true because it is empty at this point. We got to obviously add more logic to that. So if it's empty, that would be a potential error of that class. So if it is empty equals true, then that's one of the potential errors I said that I need to deal with. Data structures. Notes. Why are we getting an error there? It's just slow. Okay, so now I can go to data structures dot dialogues dot. I can output that no notes have yet been created. So that would be the case, and I will just leave at this point. I will leave this method, okay? If I can get past that little piece of error checking, then I can go on to display all the notes, right? Like, so I'm just going to move this line down to here, which is still a stub of the logic there, but it still kind of does what I hope is going to happen. If I try to display all the notes, no notes have yet been created. So that's a potential error now been solved. Now, similar thing would happen with displaying a selected note. But now what I need to check to make sure they've done is in the user interface themselves, they have actually selected something from this list box. Okay, luckily I have access to that list box. It is the thing called notes list box. So notes list box dot get selected, and I can do it by a couple different ways. I can get the selected index, which is the index number, which will return a -1 if it's not selected. I can also use get selected item, which returns a string, which will return a null. Both of those work great. I'm going to assume it's an index number at this point. I think that's going to work better because that's going to eventually work good with other things I'm going to work with. So I'm going to say if, when I get the selected index, it equals -1, that means they didn't select one, then I'm going to do something similar to what I did up here. I'm going to tell them what they need to do, which is to actually select something, and then I'm going to get out of here. Okay, please select a note from the list on the left. I think I like that. So it tells them what to do. You just select a note from the list on the left. Okay. And if they don't do that, then we're done. So let's just test that. Display the selected note. Okay. So if I do select one, there's nothing in that list yet. So it's not going to actually do anything. So it might be good just to error check this a little bit. So I'm just going to add one little line in here just for testing. I'm going to say, oops, notes list box dot add test1, and I'll add test2 here as well. So I'm going to add two things to the list box and make sure that that dialog doesn't actually appear, hopefully. Okay, so there's two items in there. If now I go display selected note, you can see it's not running the error, right? So if I have a note selected and I just click display, theoretically it would display it. So that's good testing now. It's a good part of my testing plan that that's in place. And that would also apply the same logic that I just did would apply to some of these other button actions, right? Like deleting a selected note, right? You can't delete it unless it's selected, right? Searching and sorting, that would apply more like if there's nothing there. So I'm going to add that error check to searching and sorting. So I can't search the notes if no notes have yet been created. I can't sort the notes if no notes have yet been created. Okay? So I think that's a good sort of piece of my testing plan now. If I try to search the notes, no notes have yet been created. Same with sorting. Can't delete a note if there's no note in the list. Can't display a note. The only thing I can really do is create a note, and now I've got built-in error checking. If I click OK, I have to fill out that field, right? Oh, I think I see a little potential bug in there that I got to fix in my new note controller. Date text box. Oh. Title, request focus. And then return. Seemed to be a little odd, but maybe that was just a runtime error. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you guys for this part of the video. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to shut the video down at this point, and we'll see you in the next part.